Victor Hedman seemed inevitable as the Tampa Bay Lightning captain, but how good was his first year with the C on his jersey? We'll talk about that and see what the Lightning can do to make the Stanley Cup finals in the next season.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Josh Sperber here, thanking all of you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if your team is the Tampa Bay Lightning, then this is the show for you. And we're going to start today's episode by talking about Victor Hedman, who completed his first year as Tampa Bay Lightning captain, playing 79 of 82 games in all 5 playoff games, with 3 assists in the postseason, 51 in regular season, 66 points, 15 goals in 79 regular season games. You add the 5 playoff games and 3 assists for Victor Hedman, you get a total of 84 games, 15 goals, and 54 assists for 69 points on the season, with a plus-minus of plus 12. And I think especially when you factor in the playoffs, I think it's hard to rate Victor Hedman's season just talking about the statistics. Because especially as the captain, especially in his first year as the captain, a lot of Hedman's best qualities were things that don't show up on the stat sheet. You know, just his leadership ability, his ability to stay calm and collected in front of the media. I mean, I don't think we spoke to anyone on the Lightning more than Victor Hedman this year as part of the role that he took on as the Lightning captain. Part of it was to kind of be the voice of the team as well in front of the media. And I think that role he handled incredibly. You know, he would come in front of a whole scrum, a whole press conference, after some of the toughest losses that the Lightning faced over the course of the season. And it's not easy to not just keep a straight face, but, you know, stay so professional, really. And, you know, just stay so composed after some of those tough losses. And I mean, part of it is just simply being in the NHL for, 15, 16 years, like Victor Hedman has. But I think, again, I don't think there was any doubt at the beginning of the season, back in September, when the Lightning were picking their new captain, that it was going to be Victor Hedman. I've said that time and time again, and I think that still holds true. He left no doubt at any point of the season that anyone else was in a serious running to become the Lightning captain. Hedman was also the captain of Sweden in the Four Nations face-off. I mean, the first Lightning defenseman to play 1,000 career games in the NHL. That, of course, officially happened last year, but I mean, just everything throughout his Lightning career that the Lightning have asked Hedman to do, I feel like he's done. He's still a force on the ice defensively. He's still, a force to be reckoned with, still definitely a strong player, one of the better defensemen in the NHL. Like I believe it was Julien Brisebois who said during the exit interview, he's a guy who can finish top 5 for the Norris Trophy this year and frankly every year. He's in consideration. And I think that Hedman's leadership has just been so strong for Tampa Bay. I mean, this was not an easy season, certainly a difficult playoffs to navigate through for Tampa Bay, but it's not easy for really anyone, no matter how long they've been with an organization, to follow a guy like Steven Stamkos as captain, really in any kind of capacity, as he left Tampa Bay as the leading scorer, top 5 in just about every Lightning stat. I mean, Stamkos had also been a captain for over 10 years. And it's just not easy to follow that. I mean, a guy who had been captain longer than anyone else in Lightning history, who had played more games than anyone else in Lightning history, and now at least the games part is in Victor Hedman's grasp. He had the assist record for a little bit this year, but even he admitted that would end up going to Nikita Kucherov, which, well, it did later that season. He's 6 points away from 800 in his career. You join an elite group of defensemen by hitting that mark next year. But I mean, he's just a guy who came in and just did his job every day. Hedman might be a superstar. He might be one of the more recognizable players with his longevity in the NFL, in the NHL, and certainly one of the best Lightning to ever lace up. But he doesn't carry himself like one of those superstars that think they're bigger than the team, that they're whatever it is. He doesn't carry himself like he is some kind of like flashy superstar. He's just a big guy who happens to be good at playing hockey. He's just the ultimate team guy. And again, I mean, I'll say it a million times, and I think this is probably something that every Lightning fan said when they were asked about captain. There was no other choice really for the Lightning captain. There really wasn't. It was obviously going to be Victor Hedman from the jump, and he really proved why that was the case, why there really was no other choice for the next Lightning captain after Steven Stamkos left. And he's probably the only player that the Lightning had, with the possible exception of maybe Kucherov, that could have, I don't want to say erased Stamkos's memory, but just kind of made that an afterthought really quickly. And, you can attribute some of that to the play of Jake Gensel filling in for Stamkos in that Lightning top line. However you want to justify it, that definitely some of the Lightning's offensive play made the fans kind of forget about Steven Stamkos, even if he's a player who's always going to have a lasting legacy with the Tampa Bay Lightning. But the same absolutely has to be true of Victor Hedman. I mean, you look at some of the Lightning greats. He was named to Tampa's quarter century team, was Victor Hedman. He had to be one of the guys considered for the NHL quarter century team as well. I mean, there are so few players that stay that long with one specific team and just continue such a high level of success, because you can look up and down Hedman's stat sheet, look through his career, and even in a season like 2012, 2013, the season where he played the fewest games, missing the most due to injury, Hedman has just really done everything that he possibly could for this Lightning team. He's been in the plus side of efficiency since 2012. And, he is just a guy who is a trooper. He's out on the ice more than anyone else. He's led the Lightning in ice time over the past couple of years. And it's just hard to get him off of the ice. And that's the kind of player that you want as a captain. And on the ice, off the ice, in the Lightning community, by any metric you look at this, Victor Hedman has proven to be a great player and a great person, and I think ideally suited for the role of team captain. And I think all Lightning fans can say that they're proud to have Victor Hedman wear that C next to the Tampa Bay Lightning logo on his jersey. And fans, I think, would be a lot more prouder if Tampa Bay were to make a deeper run in the postseason. It's obviously been a primary focus for the players on this Lightning team and the fans for a number of years now. And we're not talking Stanley Cup contention just yet. But if the Lightning don't make any more changes in the offseason, can they still return to the playoffs in the 25-26 NHL season? Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, Wonderful Pistachios are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are always a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. A burning question for the Tampa Bay Lightning year in and year out is always the postseason. And as a fan of Tampa, it's exactly what you want. You want to be, you want your team, the team that you support, to be a team that's really obsessed with making the playoffs. And I think that is the case when it comes to the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, every single player, not just because of the questions that were asked, but the players, coaches, GM, all talked about the playoff disappointment and the need to do whatever the Lightning can to get back to the postseason in 25-26. And it's hard to make this inference right now, but I think that the Lightning have the core of a playoff team. And I think that some of the bottom 4 teams in that Atlantic division need to do quite a whole lot to get on the Lightning's level and, get a chance to replace them in the postseason. Obviously, free agency is going to change a whole lot of things. You never know which other players that the teams in the Atlantic division might gain or lose to make them better or worse in a different direction. But I think that the Lightning have a solid core of players that, regardless of what happens in the offseason, I think I'm going to make a prediction that the Lightning are going to be one of the 4 teams in the Atlantic to make the postseason next year. The Atlantic division already comprised most of the Eastern Conference in terms of playoffs. And I think the Lightning were one of the best teams in the Atlantic division over the course of the regular season. And they weren't that far out of first place. They weren't they were pretty entrenched into that second seed over the last couple weeks of the season. And obviously the playoffs didn't work out how the team planned it, but this team, I think, as is going to be able to put themselves in a position to contend for the Stanley Cup, to make the postseason. And I just think that they might need a couple extra pieces to make themselves a team that has a legitimate chance of winning the Stanley Cup. I think when it comes to, taking that title, getting back to the promised land, as it were, the Lightning might need, maybe 1 or 2 more key pieces. But I really don't think there's much that the Lightning need to do to change their roster to just make the postseason. because I think that you look at some of the talent that Tampa has on there and some of the talent they've got in their farm system. I mean, this is a Lightning team that can be pretty homegrown. But I mean, you look at just the offensive talent. You look at their top 8 scorers, top 8 players with 40 plus points on the season. Though some of Oliver Bjorkstrand's came with the Seattle Kraken, and even if you don't count him, that's the top 7 players with 40 or more points. You have more 40 goal scorers than any other one NHL team. You know, you have 4 players with 80 points or more. Nikita Kucherov winning the Art Ross Trophy, and hopefully and probably should be the Hart Trophy once again. I mean, there is just plenty of talent on this Lightning team, and I just don't look at the Atlantic Division and see too many teams that are better suited for a playoff run than the Tampa Bay Lightning right now. You know, the Red Wings still have a chance to improve. I think the Panthers are a team that, if we look at the division, the Panthers are a team that might be able to finish next season maybe with a better regular season record than Tampa Bay. But I mean, I just don't see the Sabres doing enough to make up for, almost 30 points. Same with the Bruins. Red Wings and Canadians need to make up more like 10 or 20. But I just don't see any of those bottom 4, bottom 5 teams being able to do enough to overtake Tampa Bay in a postseason series or in a regular season series even. I just think that the Lightning have such a strong core of homegrown players and a couple other guys that I think are due for big second seasons, like Gage Gonzalez and JJ Moser, especially. Emil Lilleberg is someone who I think can also be on the rise. I mean, the Lightning do have some young talent. They might not be one of the younger teams in the NHL, but they definitely do have some young talent that I think can help them improve. I think Gage Gonzalez is a player that I'm very high on, and I think that he is he's absolutely going to be a key player for the future for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think he's going to be ready for a breakout season in 25, 26 that really establishes him as one of the best younger players in the entire NHL. I think he had a great late surge in the season that really upped his stock as one of the young players. And he's made it very clear that he's not going back to the AHL. He has earned himself a spot on the NHL roster of the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think, next year and in the next bunch of years going forward, he's a guy that can seriously help move the needle on that second or third line for Tampa Bay. I mean, it's not every day that you have an offensive player that can easily play and switch back and forth between all 3 forward positions. Gonzalez is listed as a center, and he played more often at both wings than he did at center for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think he's a big reason that the Lightning are going to be able to put up a similar season in terms of points. I mean, what have you, in terms of the division standings. Gonzalez is a reason the Lightning will be right back where they were this year come 25, 26, come that next season. They're going to retain most of their core. You look at some of the guys that are on expiring contracts, and Nick Perbix was a key defensive starter. Yanni Gourde turned into one of the key two-way forwards for Tampa Bay, but those are both guys that, Perbix, I think the Lightning are going to be able to live without, and even with Yanni Gourde, that might be a possibility with Gage Gonzalez, I think, set for a much bigger role next year. Dylan Duke's a guy who might be able to make the Lightning roster out of camp. I mean, there's so much potential when it comes to some of those Lightning younger stars that it just makes me very confident in how this Tampa Bay team is set up for success in terms of making the postseason. 8, 9 years, I think, that John Cooper in a row has made the playoffs, which is truly incredible. And you count an extra couple of years with the Syracuse Crunch as well. The Lightning are one of the best coached teams in the entire NHL, and they've got a deep roster full of talented players, and so talented enough that I think the Lightning really don't have to do all that much to put themselves in the conversation to be a playoff team. Because even with some of the struggles in January at different points of this last season, it was never really a doubt for me that the Lightning were going to make the postseason, and that has not changed, regardless of the disappointing end to the 24-25 season. And we'll finish this one up with another edition of Higher or Lower. This time we're going the Lightning third line. So for the offense, Mitchell Chaffee, Connor Geekie, Gage Gonzalez. For the defense, Emil Lilleberg and Nick Perbix. We're going to end today's show with another edition of Higher or Lower, talking about some of the Lightning talking about the Lightning's third line on offense and defense. And I'm going to start with Gage Gonzalez because pretty sure you guys know that I'm going way higher on this. I mean, I remember Gage Gonzalez coming in at the beginning of the season, and at the start of the year, I wasn't that impressed by him. He just seemed like, another young kid trying to make his way up in the NHL. But I mean, I just love the way that he works. He's a guy that doesn't complain, who is rather soft-spoken, not someone who tries to command the spotlight, anything like that. He's just a guy who shows up and does his job and gets better every single day. I mean, he's a worker, and it's very clear to see the effort that he put in over the course of this season to turn himself from a prospect, from an AHL player, to a key piece on a playoff team. And in the playoffs, Gonzalez continued to shine, was one of the Lightning's point-scoring leaders in the postseason. And I just think everything about this past year points to a breakout season for Gage Gonzalez. So he was a relatively unknown name, one of the Lightning prospects at the beginning of the season. But I'm still going way higher on Gage Gonzalez. I mean, he has really impressed me and turned into one of my favorite players on the Tampa Bay Lightning, and a guy who I think can be a big part of what the Bolts do and what they just have out there in the future. So I'm definitely going higher on Gage Gonzalez. And Connor Geekie is kind of an interesting case in this higher lower scenario, because he had a lot of hype at the beginning of the season. He was coming in as tabbed as really the future of the Lightning, the best prospect that the team had seen in years. Of course, a lot of this was before Isaac Howard's, continued emergence, and in this particular case, turning into the Lightning's best prospect. With a fantastic 24-25 season, winning the Hobey Baker Award. But Connor Geekie certainly showed that he can be a key player in the future. You saw his offense improve after getting sent down to the AHL back at the beginning of February. In the 3 remaining regular season games after his call-up from the AHL, Connor Geekie scored goals in the first 2. Had a couple assists in the postseason, was a factor on defense. And I love the physicality that he brings as a forward. He was one of the Lightning leaders in hits as a forward. And I just really like the way that he plays, how hard that he works. Um, and he really just looks like a solid two-way forward going ahead for Tampa Bay. You know, he got recalled down to Syracuse for the postseason run, but he's someone that I fully expect to start the year back on the Tampa Bay Lightning roster and, you know, keep between the second and third lines. Him and Gage Gonzalez are two players that I think are going to have an expanded role next season for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think it's both well deserved. You know, the physical play that Connor Geekie brings, in addition to his budding offensive talents, he's really growing into a solid two-way forward. I don't know if that means I'm necessarily higher on him than I was at the beginning of the season. I think that with a lot of his height, I might have thought that he'd have a lot more offensive impact than he did over the course of his first NHL season, but I still think that he is a player with a lot of potential to improve, specifically on that offensive side of the ice, and turn into a really solid two-way guy. So I don't really know if I'm going that much higher or lower. I'm going to stay relatively even when it comes to Connor Geekie because I still think there's more to see from him. I don't think the Lightning saw everything that Geekie can bring to the table in his first year as a pro. So if anything, I'll lean towards higher, but still relatively even when it comes to Connor Geekie. And Mitchell Chaffee is definitely someone that I went higher on. I mean, he's 6'1", 204, listed on the Lightning roster. And you look at a guy like that compared to some of the other players in the NHL, you don't think that he would be as much of a physical presence. But Mitchell Chaffee ended up as the Lightning leader in hits among forwards for most of the season until kind of the end of the year, where once the 11-7 kind of got back, Lightning needed a couple bigger players in the postseason as Mitchell Chaffee was the victim of a dirty hit against Florida in the last game of the regular season. But I still think I'm going higher on Mitchell Chaffee. He's just a solid glue guy. I think he's just one of the players that really any team needs. Not necessarily as a star and not necessarily as low as just being a guy who is a warm body and filling a roster spot, but he turned into a solid two-way forward and a guy that I really didn't expect that much of over the course of the season. So for Mitchell Chaffee, I'm definitely going higher. I really didn't expect him to be as big of a factor as he was in the Tampa Bay Lightning offense and frankly on defense as well. Chaffee was 16th in terms of points with 18, 12 goals and 6 assists, and did finish in the top 10 on the Lightning in goals at number 9 behind Victor Hedman's 15. So Chaffee is going to get a slight upvote in terms of higher or lower. And now we take a look at the defense. Nick Perbix, I'm going to go with lower. I think this is a relatively easy one. I think he's a good guy and a solid player, but I just don't think he does enough on either end. I mean, he's a decent contributor on defense, decent contributor on offense, but he's a guy I think the Lightning can afford to let go at the end of this season for a little bit of extra cap space. So I think I'm definitely going to go lower on Nick Perbix. And Emil Lilleberg, I'm going to go a little bit higher on. I think there's definitely a lot of parts of his game that need polishing. He's a very physical player, and sometimes that can be to a fault. He led the Lightning in penalty minutes this season, most fights, but I think there's a lot of potential. I mean, it says a lot for a 24-year-old kid to be named the captain of an international hockey team. And while Norway might not be the best hockey nation in the world, it might not be the most prestigious of teams, being able to have that honor at a young age is not something to be taken lightly. And I mean, that shows just the leadership ability that Lilleberg has. And, next year, that leadership ability is going to come into play a little bit more. He's going to be more of a veteran after now a full season in the NHL. And do I think he's going to end up as, a first line guy next to a Victor Hedman or a JJ Moser down the road? Maybe not, but I think he's someone that can be a solid, bottom four guy. I think his ceiling is maybe a second line, maybe just a solid first line defenseman, but I think there's a lot of potential with Emil Lilleberg. I think if he can control some of the physicality a little bit, then he can end up a really solid defensive player. But I'm going higher on Emil Lilleberg, and that completes the higher or lower, and it completes the episode here on Locked On Lightning. I'm Josh Sperber, telling all of you one big thank you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. And now for your second listen, make sure to check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale and find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Wherever you found today's podcast, once again, thank you. Please give us a like, subscribe, and follow. Really, I do appreciate your guys' support. So thank you again for tuning in to Locked On Lightning. See you guys tomorrow, and go Bolts.